What is going on, everybody? Today we are going to be talking about the DT MDR, which is the brand new assault rifle added to Escape for Tarkov in 11.7, and how it stacks up against its competitors like the M4 and a basic AK, as well as the God HK416. And then after that, I'm going to be showing you guys some PvP moments I had using the weapon. Now, I've decided to go primarily on factory because with the MDR being a bullpup, you're not going to have the weapon glance up or hit objects in front of you like doors or walls nearly as much as other guns. It's kind of where this weapon shines, although it is kind of a marksman rifle as well. I mean, we don't have the 308 variant in the game just yet, but this thing is accurate too, so don't just think it's like an MP7 or an AS-Val. This thing is well-rounded, and it's going to be working well in every single situation that you would normally use like an AK or an M4. Now for me in Escape for Tarkov, money is a really big factor on whether or not a weapon gets used a lot. I know that accuracy, recoil, ergonomics, it's all a big deal. Some weapons are extremely powerful and are very expensive, but if a gun is mispriced, then you don't really get to see it used very often. A good example of this was the DVL and the SV98 when they were initially added to the game. Nobody really wanted to use them. They were bolt actions. I mean, we use the Mosin all the time now, but they were just so mispriced that it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to bother using the gun. So with that in mind, let's take a look at how the MDR stacks up against its direct competitors, an AK-74 and an M4. Now, an unmodified M4 has largely gone under some massive criticism in Escape for Tarkov for its poor initial recoil, but recently it's been reworked, and the developers even said that the initial recoil and the recoil in general is actually easier to handle than an AK now. We're going to be putting that to the test right here. So let's first talk about price. The M4 can cost you 73,000 rubles if you don't barter for it or buy it from the flea market, where an AK only costs you 40,000. An argument for this is the AK-74N is just more common, but the M4 is supposed to be its direct competitor. But the one thing I can say, that increased rate of fire, if the recoil is truly more controllable, makes the M4 a better weapon, or at least it might. In the past, nobody ever used a default unmodified M4 because of its terrible recoil pattern, so how much has that changed? So for the first couple tests, I'm not going to be compensating with the recoil at all. I literally take the mouse off of my mouse pad and fire the weapon. You got that classic initial recoil kick with the M4, but for the most part, the rounds land on target after your PMC automatically compensates for it. Now let's take a look at the AK-74N and how it compares. Now it's important to remember the AK does have a slower rate of fire, but you do have an initial recoil kick just like the M4, but for the most part, your PMC is able to compensate for it quite easily at this range. But when you have fractures, movement, and range involved, things do get a little squirrely. Now let's see what happens when I actually control the recoil myself. Even though the main purpose of this video is to compare the MDR to other rifles, this test surprised me. Using the regular M4 without any attachments is actually not just controllable, but really easy to use. That is a big change, and I think the devs made this weapon actually have somewhat of a purpose, at least when it comes to its initial recoil, in comparison to where it was at before. The AK, again, always a classic, very easy to control, even without any modifications. And as a bonus, before I start talking about the MDR, take a look at the M4A1 semi-automatic fire now. This was not possible before this patch. And of course, I mean unmodified. With mods, you can get the recoil down quite severely. Alright, now it's time to talk about the MDR. Now, because this doesn't come with an optic, I decided to put a holoscope on it. It does not change the recoil at all with the weapon. So as you can see, the first test, I did not compensate for the recoil at all. And I was like, wait a minute, what just happened? My mouse wasn't on the desk. So I'm going to try to control the recoil this time. And I'm not too sure if I did a better job. Maybe the bullets are a little bit more oriented around the hollow, but honestly, the group is tighter without actually compensating for the recoil. I'm not too sure how that's really possible. One last test without compensating for the recoil at all, and as you can see, this weapon kind of does the job for you. And just because I wasn't convinced, I'm going to try to control the recoil one more time here. A little bit of a better job this time, but Honestly, it would be very difficult to tell the difference between these four groups. And here's the reason why the recoil is so low. Right out the box, fresh from Peacekeeper, this thing only has slightly above 200 recoil, and the EOTech doesn't help compensate for it at all. So this thing, even though it's a little bit more on the pricier side, we're going to get to that in just a moment, is pretty much ready to go right out the gate, other than the fact that you could put a suppressor on it, which is going to reduce the recoil even more, especially with the NT4. The only catch is, this ADR has the same fire rate as the AK-74M, not the M4, at 650 rounds per minute, but to be completely honest, that's more than enough, and considering how easy it is to control this weapon without any modifications at all, it might be worth it to somebody who is struggling with the M4 or doesn't want to invest over 100,000 rubles in attachments for their 5.56 weapon. So as we can see, the MDR is a superior weapon choice to the M4 and the AK straight out the box without any modifications. But here is a bit of an issue. The MDR costs the same amount as an SVD at 95,000 rubles. The M4 being 73,000 rubles and the AK being only 40,000 rubles. Now what surprises me a little is the MDR is only 10,000 rubles cheaper than an HK416, and the HK has a faster rate of fire, is almost the same cost, more modifications can be put on the HK, and it's largely considered one of the best weapons in the game because its ease of control. Now the developers already reduced the cost of the MDR a little bit to be more in line with the SVD, but I think they need to take it back a little bit further. Here's what I'm talking about. So with the M4 being so much more expensive than a base AK, I would love to see an M4 cost around 55 to 60,000 rubles. That's going to get more players using a standard M4 or a lightly modified M4 over something like an ADAR. I would also like to see the cost of an MDR reduced to around 80,000 rubles or 75,000 rubles. That way it has more of a purpose and it bridges the gap between M4 players and HK416. And for players that really like M4s or 5.56 weapons but simply can't afford them, they typically opt for an AK-74. You're going to be seeing more default or lightly modified M4s if you reduce that cost, and then you're also going to be seeing more MDRs in maps like Labs and Factory in comparison to the HK416, which is still always going to have a purpose because of how good that weapon is in the late game and as a very expensive weapon choice. I think the MDR being at 95,000 rubles is going to cause, I think, a few issues, and I've already started to see that. It's a new flashy weapon that you're not seeing used very often simply because it's a little bit mispriced. I think that if they can dial down the cost a little bit, I think people are going to be wanting to use this weapon more. And of course, you can't modify it that much. You can put some MOE attachments and M-lock, lasers, and a variety of different grips and suppressors, but other than that, it doesn't really have a whole lot of options when it comes to modifications just yet. So people will most likely prefer to mod an M4 or an HK416, which leaves this gun in a bit of a limbo state. The only counter argument to that is the MDR works right out the box almost just as well as a modified weapon. So for players that don't like to spend 10-15 minutes modifying their guns perfectly the way they want them, this MDR can be bought. You can get a PKO6 or a holoscope, slap it on there, and you're going to have a weapon that is really easy to use, reliable. The recoil is going to be, well, as you can see, non-existent. That being said, I would love to hear what you guys have to say about the MDR in the comment section below, and let's take a look at a few PvP moments running the MDR. Well, it's time to unfortunately run into a lot of pistol players on Factory, but gonna be spawning in and doing a quick break off, turning off that laser so I don't have guys on my left hand side spot me crossing. Well, I'm pretty lucky that they nerfed LPS. I'm wearing a class 4 ceramic body armor, so the LPS was tanked by that, and I was able to walk away unscathed. Whenever I get this spawn, I always get the little heebie-jeebies whenever I'm crossing through the open. So one strategy is jumping down into the middle boiler and then coming back through the spawn points from behind. Right now, if you want to survive on factory, if you have a little bit of extra cash and you have it unlocked, wear a face shield. That poor guy was only using a Makarov, and without it, even with SP7, it would be very unlikely that he would be able to net a kill on this Zisha. There is no side openings on this helmet, so he can't even weave a shot through a side angle. I would love to protect those arms right now because I keep getting them blasted off, but unfortunately it's just too much money, like 200k for a Gen 4 assault, and I'm not really willing to spend that money right now, so I guess the arms are going to get a little bit shredded and turned into spaghetti.
You are fucked!
You know, trying to do anything on a busted leg just makes things so much more annoying. Well, the guy's trying to run for extraction, so I know he's not going to be camping the door. I'm not too sure if this guy's plan was to go for the extraction or to lure me in and then switch to the AK to try to take me out. I still think the machinery spawn is a little bit more chaotic than Red Light and Player 1 Start. Do you guys remember that? Unfortunately, there's a lot of pistol players on tonight. I'm trying to look for some good fights, but unfortunately, I just can't find anybody that's too terribly geared. That 6 PMC pistol kill mission, there's a lot of people doing stirrup right now, so I'm running into very light opposition. Lately, I've been playing around with the idea of using an AI2 on number 5 instead of an IFAK and a Salawa, and it's honestly kind of working out really well. Player scav, and honestly, with the APS, this guy's more geared than most of the PMCs I've been running into on Factory tonight. After putting in a little bit more time to try to find some more worthy fights, I just wasn't able to find too many people that were terribly geared on Factory, and I felt like Factory was the perfect map to showcase exactly how powerful the MDR really is without jumping on Labs. Labs, I probably will do some more videos specifically with the MDR on Labs, full raids from the stream, so definitely subscribe here to my YouTube channel if you want to see that. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about the MDR, and then also, what are your thoughts on some of my suggestions? I'd like to hear that in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching once again. Check out the live streams Monday through Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'll catch you all in the next one.